wouldn't necessarily know whether this is going to be happy as such, because in my spare time I like to write a little bit of horror. So yeah, what I'm going to do today is read out a short horror story that I wrote about a couple of years ago, which I released in a collection of short horror stories called Crumbs from the Devil's Table, which you can pick up at any Amazon outlet. But yeah, I'm going to read for you a story which is one of my favourites that I've written, if I'm allowed to say that. It's called Night Train, and it's about regret. I haven't had many regrets in my life, but I do find it quite a horrific topic, you know? Don't think there's many things scarier than laying at bed at night regretting things. Not that I do, again. But yeah, so here we go. This one's called Night Train. Please feel free to not look at me as I'm reading this out. Close your eyes and proper get into it. And yeah, here we go. It was the kind of night that stopped you going out, however many alluring invites you received. Jack, however, had no choice. So bitter was the cold, he didn't think he would survive to see the morning's rays break through. It was nearly midnight, and out of all the battles his homelessness had presented him with, this one looked to be the toughest of all. He was sat on a bench at the train station. There was no shelter, but at least he was safe from pub leavers urinating on him. At least there would be no violence from unsavoury characters that at night time sometimes brought with it, or so he hoped. He had been found at a train station as a baby, so in some ways, a train station was his home anyway. The next train was due at 5:40 a.m, so he knew he was safe from station officials. Once he heard the birds tweet, his plan was to crawl back through the hole in the fence and be on his way before the police could be called. He rummaged through his carrier bag and pulled out a mini bottle of value whiskey. In his eyes, this was the closest thing to central heating that he had. His gulp went down like water. Years and years of drink abuse had built up the ability to booze without wincing. The unsettling sound of a rowdy crowd seeped through the icy air. Jack clutched his bottle tightly out of force of habit. Just when it seemed like the mob had become dangerously close, a rather unexpected downpour came and washed the rabble away. This was a curse and a blessing, because Jack had nowhere to hide from the cold needles showering down upon him. He quickly returned the bottle to his carrier bag and squelched his soaking feet back towards the hole in the fence. Shelter was essential to his survival in these conditions. Just as he began to crawl through the gap, a glittering light illuminated the raindrops and shone onto his face. It was coming from the under the railway track. He guarded his eyes with his hand in an attempt to make out the white glow, which was becoming bigger by the second. The increasing chugging sound confirmed Jack's hunch. It was indeed a train. But how? He gasped. The last train had rolled out of town over an hour before. Maybe they had a new timetable that he wasn't aware of, he thought. As the train approached, Jack shuffled down the platform to greet it. The front cab zoomed past him, way too fast to get a look at the driver. It had more carriages than he had ever seen on one before. As each carriage hurtled by, he noticed there was a distinct lack of passengers on every one. Now, Jack had had his fair share of scrapes with the law, being thrown off of more public transport than he could remember. But the warm amber of the carriages was too tempting to ignore in a night like this. To his relief, the rhythm of the chugs eased to a swampy tempo. The final carriage screeched to a halt exactly at his feet, and the doors flung open. Jack looked up and down the platform before cautiously stepping on board, and the doors closed immediately. The train pulled away with a whistle, and Jack eased into the first seat on the end. He huffed out a sigh of relief of being in the warm, even if it did mean being lectured by one of the inspectors later on in the journey. It was worth it on this occasion. This prompted his next thought. Where in the hell was this train heading? Slowly, he got to his feet and searched for the train map, but there wasn't any. He walked the carriage with a slight limp from where a bit of glass had found its way into his weathered boot a few months prior. Quite unusually, there wasn't any markings apart from the carving of the carriage number, which was at a mammoth number 80. He picked up his carrier and swatched his way onto carriage 79 to search for the train route. To his surprise, carriage 79 was just as bare. What was even more of a shock was that his limp had gone. The pain from his heel had completely disappeared without any lingering signs that the glass had cut him at all. With ease, he trod all the way to the end of carriage 79 and peered through the door that led to the carriage 78. Just like the previous two, it was also empty of passengers. Puzzled by the curious train, Jack opened the door and pressed onto 78. Almost immediately, he felt a stabbing in his stomach, which was sharp enough to bring him to his knees. He hadn't felt this level of pain in his belly since he was kicked there 2 years previously by an unkind midnight stroller. The pain eased as he crawled along, and soon enough he was able to regain his upward position. Yet again, 78 lacked any information regarding the destination. The train wobbled as its speed increased. Jack held onto a pole to regain his balance and squinted into the blackness of the window. There were no signs of outside life. Not a house, lamp, or station in sight. His eyes readjusted to his reflection, and he observed how his hair looked freshly trimmed and combed, just like that time 2 years ago when a kind barber had given him a free haircut. He took a few steps back and fell into the seat behind him, aghast at what was happening. Carriage 79 matched the age he was at before he cut his heel. Carriage 78 matched the age he was at when he got beaten, and later on, a free haircut. Jack pulled out his bottle and guzzled his drink down, throwing the carrier onto the floor. There was only one way to convince himself that he wasn't going insane. Carriage 77. He got to his feet and shuffled on through, and quickly exited to carriage 76. Just as he had hoped, and also feared, his cough and heavy chest disappeared instantly. He walked on to the end of 76 without any major incidences, and his reflection from the windows looked roughly the same. 75, 74, 73 were also the same, give or take a pane or two here and there. By carriage 72, he found that there was more fluidity in his step, and as the carriage numbers decreased, his health increased. By number 60, he was able to pick up his pace to a gentle jog. This was amazing to Jack, as he hadn't been able to move so briskly for 20 years. He gave a quick glance to the reflection in each carriage as he sprinted through them, and his smile grew as his face began looking younger and fresher by the minute. He stopped at carriage 40 for a while to catch his breath. It was here that he took a proper look at the young man staring back at him through the blackened glass. At 40 years of age exactly, Jack had become a full-time drinker. This had, in time, led to his dismissal at work. The rest of his life from 40 had been downhill. His wife had left with the kids, his house had got repossessed, and he had wound up on the streets by 50. Jack eyed his attire, always one to keep up with the trends of the time. Jack's clothes echoed the decades. He peered through at carriage 39. If each carriage was him at his age, then all he had to do was get to the carriage before his life began to derail, the age at which he was happiest. Once he got there, he would simply stop the train and get off at that platform. There, he'd be able to right all his wrongs and not treat Mary with such aggression and disdain. He'd be there for his kids instead of drinking his sorrows away in his local pub. He'd been given another chance at life, and this time, he'd get things right. Jack knew exactly which carriage to stop the magical train at, carriage 23. He would exit the platform and go to meet his beloved Mary straight away. Onwards he jogged through carriage 39, and just as before, as the carriage numbers decreased, the better he felt in himself. All the energy and enthusiasm of his 30s came rushing back, all the way down to carriage 30. Youth flourished through his body as he stormed onto carriage 29. He charged through his 20s almost like he had done so in his real life, until he finally reached carriage 23. He proudly gazed into the window's reflection. At 23 years of age, Jack was at the prime of his life. He gleamed at his dapper navy suit and his Stetson hat. No longer would he drink after work with the boys from the office. God had given him a chance to start over, and he wasn't going to waste 1 minute of it. He searched around for the call to halt the train, but there wasn't one. He tried the handles on the door, but to no effect. He shouted for the driver to stop, but the train kept to its rapid speed. There was only one thing for it. He would have to press on to carriage number 1, bang on the driver's door, request that he stopped, and go back to carriage 23. Jack trudged through his teenage years, all the time being well aware that he'd be a baby by carriage 1. As long as he made it back to carriage 23 after the train had stopped, then he could put his life right. His voice unbroke itself, and his school uniform gave him a chuckle. 10, 9, 8. Jack skipped his way through the rest of the carriages, happy, carefree, full of hope. By the time he was at carriage 3, everything around him looked a hell of a lot bigger. He couldn't even see his reflection over the train seats. Finally, he stood at the front of carriage 1. Right at the very far end, he could see the driver's door. This was it, his final steps for a brand new chance at life. He wobbled down the carriage, holding onto the seats for support. Halfway through, his legs stopped working and he began to crawl. He wiggled up to the train driver's door and hit the bottom of it 3 times. The train began slowing straight away and screeched itself to a standstill. Jack smiled. His plan had worked. Almost. The train driver's door flung open and brought with it a giant white light. A silhouette stood in the middle of the brightness and stepped forward. It was a cheery young man who was dressed in an old-fashioned uniform. "Blimey!" he yelped in shock. Hello, fella," he chirpily carried on. "How on earth did you get here? The train isn't supposed to have any passengers on it." Jack tried to explain his predicament, but it came out as a barrage of gurgles. So he decided to turn around to begin crawling back to carriage 23. "Oh, no, you don't. I'd better take you to the station manager." The young driver picked him up and carried him through to the driver's cab. He opened the cab door and walked Jack through the busy crowds at the platform. Everybody was dressed in the fashions that were around when Jack was a child. The old ladies gushed over him and pulled at his cheek, much to his dissatisfaction. Finally, the driver got to the manager's office. "Sorry to bother you, sir, but I've just found this baby on my train, and it was all by himself." "Oh, no, not another one. This is happening more and more, poor little sod. A single mother realises that she can't afford to raise a baby, so she'll leave it on a train, where she knows it'll be found." The manager peered over his glasses at Jack whilst patting him on the head. "Right. I'll call the nurses. They'll know what to do with the lad." "What'll happen to him, sir?" the driver inquired. "No doubt he'll find a family. If not, he'll be put into care, I suppose, the poor little blighter." Jack's grills didn't work. He just hoped that he would remember to do the right thing in life this time around. Mind you, not many people have memories of when they were babies, do they? The end. Hope you enjoyed. There you go. And as I say, if you want to read more of my stories, they're available in the book Crumbs from the Devil's Table, which you can buy on Amazon now. Thank you.